I just want to thank everybody for showing up to this listening session for the city's Recode LA project. I'm here to tell you a little bit about where we are and why we're here and what this project is all about. I'm also going to introduce the consultant team who we've just brought on board with the city to help us work on this 5-year project. We're looking to provide a new zoning code for the city of Los Angeles within the next 5 years. This plan has 3 parts to it. The first, the citywide zoning code, will also have a web-enabled base to it so that users and all stakeholders can search and find out the specificities and the zoning for every property and all the projects, much simpler than what it is today with looking through our whole zoning code. The second item is a layperson's guide to zoning, similar to what the Department of Building and Safety puts out in their handbook, a simplified version, a layman's terms for what the zoning code is really intending to do. And lastly, we're looking at a 2-year program for writing the zoning code for downtown. So it's a unified development code for downtown, which will be a subset of the entire citywide zoning code. The project team is made up mostly of city staff from the Department of City Planning and our consultant team. We have 1 prime consultant that we've hired along with about 14 subcontractors. The main team is from Austin, Texas, and their name is Code Studio, and I'll be bringing them up shortly. The core planning team from the planning department is the deputy director, Alan Bell. He's supervising this project. I'm the senior planner, the project manager, Eric Lopez, David Olivo, Deborah Cahan, Daisy Moe, and Katie Peterson will also be helping. I'm going to go into a little bit of the background of why we're here and why it's so important for the city to revise and start a new zoning code. Our zoning code is pretty old. It was first created back in 1946. It was the consolidation of 11 separate land use ordinances that were scattered throughout the municipal code. At that time, it was consolidated into one planning and zoning code, and essentially it has stayed the same ever since. It has just been added to and added to over the last 67 years. And at that time, the city was coming out of or the whole country. It was coming out of World War II. We were expanding. It was a suburban model. The term that's used most often for this type of zoning code is a Euclidean code, where we separated the land uses. Essentially, that was the premise back in the 40s, where people lived in one place, people shopped in one place, and people worked in a different place. So manufacturing, commercial, and residential, essentially. We realize today that that model is not the most efficient use of land. It is not the way people live today. So we are looking to integrate that and to update it. Although it has been updated over the years, it's been done on a hodgepodge basis. It's a very telling picture. The book on the left is the 1946 zoning code. If anybody would like to see it, they can come to our offices on the 7th floor of City Hall. We have 2 copies. You can't take it home with you, but you can look at it. The middle one is 1978, and there's the steroid version from today. Same nomenclature, same numbering, same land use designations. We've just been adding to it. We have some very outdated terms in the new zoning code, in the existing zoning code. We have addressograph services, mimeograph services. We have hospitals for the criminally insane. We have haberdasheries and millineries, so feel free to file for applications for any one of those tomorrow. Why is this a problem? Why can't we keep going with this 1946 zoning code? Well, we can, and we have been doing a pretty good job of holding it together. We've been putting Band-Aids on this code with all the new modern problems and modern issues. It's just something that we need to really comprehensively overhaul. So again, I said we still have the same basic zoning classifications from the 1940s. Things are different. We need to update that. We have scattered language. We've been adding terms and language over the years, and it really doesn't match up always. There's contradictory language. There's cross-references that sometimes work and sometimes don't. And it's just complicated regulations. There's a series of processes that are outlined, yet all of the processes are slightly different. And there's really no rhyme or reason about why that is. The code and the city and the planning rely overly on site-specific plans and site-specific regulations. So in many cases throughout the city, we have a citywide zoning code, but it doesn't apply citywide. We have a citywide zoning code that's overlaid with many specific plans, many community design overlays, many design review boards, many everything. There's mine keeping districts, there's equine districts, there are a variety of different special use districts. We can fix all that. Instead of having people look through the different codes, we can have them go to one place. And additionally, through zone changes over the years, we've added additional layers onto our properties. So we have our basic citywide zoning code, maybe a couple layers here and there with specific plans, and then we also have site-specific qualifying conditions. We call those Q conditions, where we have even further regulation. So quite often, developers, homeowners, project owners have to look in a series of books to find out what they can and cannot build. And lastly, a very important point is that we have a lot of very experienced and talented urban planners at the planning department. We've come up with a lot of good urban design guidelines. However, it does not get accomplished through our old code. Our old code is very outdated and could use some updating. This is another big problem we have. This is just one of several shelves in our 7th floor where we have interpreted the code through memos since the 40s. And unless you know where to go, you really don't know the entire zoning code unless you can go to the 7th floor and ask the receptionist to help you out and look through one of these files about how we've interpreted the code throughout the years. A lot of these are site-specific, so it talks about why the overheight fence is allowed in these districts or why a mini shopping center can do something that others can't. But there's really no reason to have us what we call the shadow code. What we want to do is go through all this, find out what's important and what can be most helpful throughout the city, cull it all together, and then incorporate it into a new revised zoning code. This is a good table. You're not supposed to be able to read this, but just for illustrative purposes, this is a chart of all of the processes that we have in our code today. We have about 72 separate processes that people have to go through. Some of them are minor additions to single-family homes. Some apply to large developments. Sometimes a small homeowner has to go through the same process as a large developer. Processes are complicated and different, so we did try to sync all of these processes up if there were multiple entitlements being sought for a project, and that did work to some extent, but we really do need to do an overhaul of this. It's unclear as to why some processes take longer than others and why the hearing requirements are different from one thing to another, why the appeal routes are different from one thing to another. So we really need to start standardizing this and make it simpler for homeowners, small business owners, and all stakeholders. This is a very telling map. This is LA, and this is shows two areas. It shows the light gray and the dark gray. We have a citywide zoning code that covers all of the light gray. So the light gray are the areas that are not encumbered by other plans. So as you can see, the dark gray are parts of the city that not only have to comply with the citywide zoning code, but also have to comply with a myriad of other overlay districts. So as I mentioned before, specific plans, Q qualifying conditions, delimitations, which are basically development restrictions, supplemental use districts such as community design overlays, mining districts, equine keeping, slaughterhouse districts. So we have a large variety of districts. So when you want to build in those darker areas, you have to look in the zoning code and look in your specific plan. And where the specific plan doesn't cover a certain aspect, it defaults to the zoning code. Fairly complicated. This is another pretty telling pie chart. The planning department spends 61% of its resources on processing applications. Those are applications for conditional use permits and tract maps, things that need to be reviewed, but to the extent where the planning department doesn't spend most of its time planning or most of its resources planning, indicates that there's something broken and something needs to be fixed. We only have 10 plus 4% of our department allocated for long-range planning. The rest are processing applications. We don't expect that that number is going to disappear. We're always going to be processing applications for conditional use permits and other things, but we'd like to see those numbers switched so that we can spend most of our time doing what most of the people in the city want us to do, and that's plan for the future. Talk about basically the general plan framework. This was a plan that was adopted back in the 1990s, and it was a very progressive plan for its time. It looked towards the future and to a growing city. and how are we going to accommodate the increase in population. This plan identified regional hubs, commercial districts. Aside from our community plans, it really did identify our regional center, and it was a very progressive document at the time. We did not have the population increase as much as it was projected back then, but we've definitely been increasing, and we still are. But in any case, our zoning code does not accommodate or sync up with our general plan. So one of our main criteria or goals of this plan update is to sync these two up, to have supportive tools that will enable this document to come to fruition. And I think I'm pretty much completed with the background here. I'll be here to answer questions. I'm going to turn over the mic to our lead consultant, Lee Einsweiler from Code Studio.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to apologize in advance. I have been fighting a cough all week, so I'm going to try not to cough during the course of our presentation. Our team includes our firm, Code Studio, out of Austin, Texas, and a variety of our code drafting support friends from around the country. White and Smith, Mark White from Kansas City, Peter Park, from the former director from Denver, Colorado, Nori Winter from Boulder, Colorado, and Kevin Collin is working with us from Lamphere Gregory up in Oakland, and the remainder of our team members are from here in Los Angeles. So Torty Gallus, Neil Payton is here this evening. We're working with two outreach groups, the Robert Group and VPE Public Relations. We'll be working on our environmental review with Impact Sciences. John Kaliski and Pat Smith, our local architect and landscape architect, who are going to assist us on this project as well. So a very strong both national and local team of consultants, we feel, that we hope is up to the task. One thing that we like to say at Code Studio is that we successfully manage big city code projects through their adoption. This is a key point. It takes years to finish this code drafting. It takes more years to get the pieces of it adopted, and we'll be here for that entire process. Our firm has a reputation for innovation in coding, and that reputation is principally founded on a simple concept: the right rules in the right places. And one of the fascinating things about Los Angeles is how many places you have under the single umbrella called the City of Los Angeles. And yet we discover crazy things like the fact that 85% of your commercial land is all in the same zoning district, C2. Unheard of in most communities that one flavor like that would be intended to apply so many different kinds of places. Now, you've modified that over time. You've put layers on top. When you do rezoning, you've added conditions, you've added overlays. There are lots of ways that you have made the code work better, but fundamentally no one has reached into that code and said, this needs to be more unique for this place. And that's one of the things we're going to be looking at during the course of this process. We spend a lot of our time implementing visionary plans. We think there's a lot of great planning going on here in Los Angeles, a lot more to be done in the near future. There are several more community plans coming. There's a lot of stationary planning to occur. And so we look forward to helping implement those plans as they come down through the pipeline. We have also, as a team, various members of the team have been involved in the creation of great places. In fact, designing and coding for places in other communities. It's one of the key things that we think brings some reality to our ability to code for good urban design here as we move into the future. Finally, we feel that we successfully educate and facilitate in the course of these projects. Zoning is a kind of wonky subject, I'll admit it, but some of us actually like it and are willing to talk about it pretty much 24/7. And those of us who actually do enjoy it spend a lot of time thinking about it. And we're going to spend, we hope, an equivalent amount of time bringing these ideas out to the public and helping them understand why they might be useful and why some change is probably appropriate. Finally, we believe that we present user-friendly and elegant documents. It's critical in this day and age that we think of a paradigm that runs beyond the simple legal version of 2 columns of text that goes on for pages and pages and pages. And so thinking hard about how to provide more community planning tools by being more visual with our coding, providing more options for the planners when they get finished with their neighborhood planning efforts. Better integration of ideas about private property and the public realm, the sidewalks and the streets, and providing clear and consistent regulations so that they're easy to enforce, easy to manage on into the future. Some simple things like illustrating the intent of a district, illustrating what a street is intended to look like. You can do an immense amount of good by signaling and broadcasting to the development community what you would like to see. These kinds of illustrations help a whole lot in generating the right kind of activity in the applications that come in. Part of this project will be a web-based zoning code system. Tom alluded to it earlier. We're very excited about this. There is no outstanding web-based code system in the country right now. And LA has a chance to really push the envelope here and generate a delivery system that runs the gamut from the phone in my pocket to my tablet to my computer, is available 24/7 everywhere I go, ubiquitously. And as a model, we think it's very exciting. The possibilities include a design concept we're trying to hold in mind, which is that not everyone needs the whole book, right? So maybe the book will be 600 pages, maybe it'll be 800 pages. If we could give you just the pages that reflect your property or your project, wouldn't that be much, much better? It would be a subset of those pages, and you wouldn't need the whole book, and frankly, it wouldn't matter how big the whole book was if you could get just the pieces you needed. And this web paradigm has the possible opportunity, sort of tickling our fancy out there, that we might actually get to the point where we can achieve that. Predictable and effective processes. This is critically important. You saw the much, much bigger chart that's in place today, 70+ entitlement processes. Clearly, some of those can be consolidated. The notice provision can be reviewed and made consistent. The review bodies who are involved and engaged in the projects can be made consistent so that it's much, much easier at the counter or for anyone from the outside to tell how to get a project reviewed. I think one important thing is that we all agree that downtown is on the upswing, and nobody wants to slow that down. In fact, if there were a single part of the entire city that we can probably all agree ought to continue to grow, it's downtown. So taking advantage of that ongoing economic recovery by doing our first work in the downtown area is one of the things that we intend during the course of this project. We will run a very broad-based public participation during the course of this. We are intending to have not only the technical advice of the staff, but policy advice from a committee that's established, we believe, by the planning director. Has yet to be established, and if there are members of the audience who might be interested in serving on that committee, you should catch up with Tom afterwards. We're going to use a model for bringing out our work products in the 7 area planning commission boundaries. So 7 regional forums will be held on virtually every final document that we work up. We've been holding a series of stakeholder group meetings this week already. They are a very effective mechanism for us, putting 10 or 20 people in a room that we can really have a strong conversation with, people that are steeped in the knowledge of the existing code and their recent projects. There'll be a very good project website. It's already up in temporary fashion at recode.la. I encourage you to go check it out. You can sign up for our Facebook page and to continue to receive notice about future meetings. It also allows a comment spot. It provides a calendar function. It's a good interim measure, and in the long run, we'll have a much more robust web page in which we hope to be able to do some fun things like allow you to post good and bad photos from your neighborhood, for example, and some other kinds of things that might make this project more interesting for everyone. Some of the supplemental methods that the planning department uses today will also be engaged in this project. The typical kinds of things they do, attending plan check, their typical electronic mailing list, their quarterly newsletters, all of those kinds of things that they do during their normal planning processes will also be employed during this project. So one of the things that our firm likes to suggest is that the kind of code work that we can do can have a very positive effect on the community. It can unlock the potential of local plans. You have a number of local plans that have not necessarily reached their full fruition even after many years of being in place. And some of that may well be because zoning is remaining as a barrier. So it's an opportunity for us to look at each of those plans and make recommendations about how to change the zoning and remove some of those barriers. We like to suggest that we think boldly about where we might go in this project. One of the things that happens if you have 86% of your time in the planning staff spent on issues like processing permits is you get very embedded in the weeds of daily projects. And it's very hard to reach back out and think about those bold new ideas about the entire zoning system, which our team can bring to the table. Greater certainty about outcomes, that seems to be the number one thing that everyone would like to see out of the end of this project. But one serious possibility is that we have some potential for leveling the playing field for the little guy. If you happen to own a 50 or 100-foot slice of one of the commercial corridors in town right now, and you want to build the beautiful mixed-use building that's envisioned in the plan for your area, there's probably very little hope that you could do it by yourself. You can't just come in and talk to the planners and figure it out. You're going to need some professional help from planners, expediters, lawyers, et cetera, to get through the process today. We'd like to be able to slim some of those layers back down to where really most anyone can have the same impact in terms of their ability to use their property, whether they're a large-scale user or a small-scale user. No doubt that a new code can provide opportunities for investment and reinvestment. It can ease the process of neighborhood infill. If you stop and think, basically LA's boundaries are fixed by about now. They may change slightly over the years, but they're mostly fixed. You've expanded about as far as you will ever expand. That suggests that everything we do from here on out might be considered infill. Right? We're filling back in the city that we've already created. So we need to think very hard about the compatibility of new projects in those areas and how we make them more compatible the first time around so that we don't all have to fight about them all the time. Speeding up the process of approving development, naturally people are interested in this, provided that public input is still a valuable part of the process. Improving the enforcement of the regulations. When every given site has layers and layers of obligations on top of it, figuring out as the poor code enforcement officer which rules apply and which rules don't apply and which exceptions apply and which special conditions apply is very challenging. So improving code enforcement simply by simplifying the underlying ordinance that they enforce is also a serious possibility in this project. One of the key points, though, is that we are here as a team to code and implement the community's existing plans. We are not coming in from outside to impose our notions of planning on the city of Los Angeles, but rather to read through your plans and work with the staff to more effectively implement the plans that are already in place. So some of the things that we'd like to achieve at today's listening session. We'd love to get your comments about the existing code, about things that you like and don't like that are outcomes of the code. And so I'm offering up here a set of simple questions that can serve as a starter set in case you don't have anything to respond to in your head right this minute. So how could the code itself be improved, the document? Is that more graphics, more flowcharts, more tables? What ways could we actually fix the document proper, even if we didn't change policy a bit? What about the procedures? Is it easy for people to understand how you get a project approved or how you speak against a project and get involved in an appellate process? What's been built recently? Is there stuff you've seen that you actually enjoy, that you like seeing? Is there stuff that you're not very happy about? And finally, are there things happening in other communities that you would like to see happening here in Los Angeles? So those are my starter questions. Help us by offering your comments on the existing code.